All right, says we're live. Oh, just want to welcome everybody. Thanks for coming out today. I'm Rob. I'm joined here by two other people you can't see, but they're audio, and I'll let them introduce themselves here. So we got Sherry. Go ahead, Sherry.
Hey guys, it's Sherry Jensen, owner of silverbulletcutters.com.
All right, and then we also have Michelle. Go ahead, Michelle.
Hi everyone, I'm Michelle.
And I'd like to mention that Dawn is in the middle of a retreat this weekend. She'll be back next week.
All right, so what are we going to talk about today, Sherry?
Okay, tonight we wanted to talk about laser-like cutting with a blade. We're going to do some really fun things. We're going to have Rob actually cut this cheetah, cougar, whatever it is in front of you that you see now. We're going to have him cut that a little bit later in the show so you can see how precise the cuts are on that. It will be cut out of material called Tyvek, Tyvek. It's a very, very simple medium to cut. Those that have been in the building industry would understand it to mean that Tyvek that you wrap around the house to protect it. It's like a paper plastic type medium. And then the blade that Rob's going to use on that is just a 45-degree blade. It's very, very easy to cut. It's very similar to cutting vinyl, as a matter of fact. And the settings that we're going to use for that, Rob, do you want to explain that?
With this little cougar, a little puma, the settings that I use here, and I tell you, you're not going to find, another machine or another company that will tell you, hey, use the max velocity with this. And so I used 800 for the velocity with this, and for the force, I stuck with 60. And you'll see in this demo on how quick this is. So I timed this with my little iPhone timer, and it was just over 5 minutes to cut this. And if you're wondering how many nodes are on here, it's around 4,000 nodes. Okay, so a lot of nodes, and if you don't know what a node is, that's how many times the blade has to make a turn around something. So, a little over 4,000 nodes with this, and it cut with using the speed of 800 millimeters. And go over to the camera. So this is what I'm talking about here. We got the velocity that's set to 800 millimeters per second. That's how fast that housing unit on the front moves from left to right. And then the F is, of course, the force.
While we were demoing this last night, Rob was not aware, as many people are not, there's the ability to be able to set the force and velocity in the software. We recommend not setting that. I had suggested that to Rob last night, but he, likes to try things anyway, and he did. And I believe it was that force and velocity kept changing on you while it was running, did it not, Bob?
Yeah, so when you go and cut in Shortcut Slide, it allows you to set the force and velocity within the software. And which, although is a nice feature, just like Sherry said, it did not work sort of as advertised, and maybe Brandon can work on that. But
Right.
Once I hit the cut button, when it was set to 800 and it was set to 60, the silver bullet itself, it stayed constant at 500. But you can change that mid-cut with no issues by using that pause button.
Yeah, can we go back and show them that real quick, Rob? The pause button, the bright blue button down in the bottom left corner, thank you. That pause button, again, last night, Rob wasn't sure, and we had to recut some things. And as those who own the Cougar or the Silver Bullet or the Cougar, past Cougar, know that when you've completed cutting something, if it hasn't cut all the way through, or if you're in the middle of a job and the telephone rings, you got to get up and you got to run, you hit that pause button and it will pause. And when you come back, you hit it again and it will pick up right where you left off. And we were kind of joking about it last night, and I've actually left it for long lengths of time and come back and it started all over again. So it's a really great feature to have. And then I also wanted to say that the files that you're going to see tonight, some of them, this Cougar specifically is Dawn Grantham's, and she doesn't currently have that at the site, but she will. She also has a zebra and we're just gonna say this right up front. In our trying to cut it last night, it cut beautifully. Everything was wonderful, and it looked really, really great until you tried to get off the mat and put it back together. And there's just so many pieces to it. And because the Tyvek has a tendency to curl a little bit, Dawn has a specific way of doing it, as most things, and she'll share that with us so that it makes it easier, because it's a really beautiful file, and it's beautiful when it's done. But unlike this, the one in front of you now, it's quite difficult to get it to all line up, where this one was just a breeze. Rob just cut it first and pulled it off the mat. It was great.
Yeah, yep. Yeah, and once once we're done completing with the cut of the cougar, then I can show you the zebra because I actually cut it out today after I came home from work because
Oh, you did.
I was determined to get that thing looking correctly. So I did end up doing it. It just took me a little more
Okay.
time than what the cougar did because the cougar was a
Oh,
simple
okay, good.
peel. So, I mean, something that you may be surprised with this cougar is, I mean, it's all one piece. I mean, you just have a little break right here where that with that ear right here, but it is one piece, and it's pretty cool. And Tyvek, I'd never heard of it. Sherry sent it to me, and I was like, man, I was like, this feels like a Christmas wrapping paper because scissors scissors would just cut right through it. I mean, you didn't even have to use your scissors to snip; it would slide right through. And I was like, man, I was like, I hope I don't, when I'm peeling this off, I hope I don't tear anything.
Yeah,
Well, I mean, you try to peel Tyvek with your fingers, and you can't. I mean, you can't
you
pull
can't
it
tear
apart.
it.
Yeah,
Yeah, you cannot tear it.
yeah. So you'll be surprised if you ever end up getting Tyvek. I guess that's what
Yeah,
I'm saying.
yeah,
Because
and
I was surprised. Like I said,
it's a phenomenal product, and we might add we're going to have a close up a little bit later on. Michelle's going to share her screen and show the close ups, but the whiskers on this are less than the size of a piece of thread, so it's really
yeah,
dramatic how fine this thing will cut.
yeah. I took a photo of this, and I think Michelle's going to show it here. And the I put a penny right next to one of the whiskers, so you can actually see how small this is.
Yeah. Should we go ahead and share Michelle's screen and talk a little bit about the other things, and then we'll
Yeah,
come
yeah.
back to cut this? Okay, I'm going to explain this one. This was it's kind of interesting. The day that the silver bullets were delivered, Sherry Anderley is my accountant, and she took a machine home that night. And of course, one of the things that we did when we reinvented this machine into the silver bullet was we wanted to get, as we said before, the laser like cutting with a blade. A lot of graphic artists that needed that because they can't use the laser light on different types of graphics paper because it burns the edges of it. And people that were wanting to cut plastics, obviously can't use a laser, but they can with this machine. So we wanted to prove the laser cuts. So Sherry took the machine home that night. And she came the next day, and she had two pieces of white cardstock, and took the top sheet off, and this is what was below it, and she showed it to me, and I absolutely started bawling. I mean, by just looking at this, I knew that we had hit it. The reins going from the camel to the wise men are less, probably half the size of a piece of thread if you once you've cut it and seen it, and all the grass and flowers and things down below, everything was intact. She cut it, one pass, and it pulls off the mat really nicely. All the little dots here are supposed to be stars, and she had done it in little stones and things like that. But this is probably one of the finest things that we show. I've got it hanging in the studio, and it really, really illustrates how fine the cutting is on this. We've cut it in vinyl, we've cut it in cardstock, we have cut this in Tyvek as well, and it cuts beautifully with all mediums that we've cut it in. And the fairy down below, Michelle has that as well. This is another thing that we cut out the wings on this fairy. We were given this file by a graphic artist who needed to cut these, and they needed to be cut out of acetate. There was a lady making mobiles with fairies on them, and some of them have actual butterfly wings as well. So this was just one of the plain wings. We don't have a sample of the one with butterflies, but this demonstrates again how, and this being blown up in front of you like this, it looks much larger here than it does in person. But in person, those wings are less than a piece of thread. It's pretty phenomenal. It's the detail that you're getting off of this.
Yeah, I cut that. That was, I believe, 7.5 inches when I cut it today. So that's how tall it is.
And just a standard 45-degree blade, Michelle, and
Yes, standard
okay.
45-degree blade. And I used, force I used on that was 70, and velocity I used 800.
Just standard black cardstock.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And the same thing for the wise men, the top picture.
Mm-hmm.
I used that was force on that was 87 per my cardstock, and then 800 again for the velocity.
Okay, so you ran those both at full speed, and
Hmm.
that's again, we just want to keep reiterating that to people because there's a lot of other manufacturers out there that that their machines run at 800, but you'll never see them, as Rob says, mark anything higher than cutting at 400. Which this machine is meant to run at 800, and it runs just as well at 800, other than when you get to denser mediums. So we like to encourage people to run it full out and cut it, especially these intricate designs. It will do it, and it's so much nicer to get through it so fast. We
Hmm.
hear that we hear that from people all the time, and I know Michelle too was like, "Well, should I really run this at 800?" And this was a while ago, and I'm like, "Yeah, absolutely." Because what's the worst that can happen? You've ruined a piece of cardstock because it wouldn't cut that fast, or you
Exactly.
save a lot of time. So when you get comfortable with running the machine at 800, people then do not want to turn the machine down if there's something. And I tell them specifically, these detailed cuts will cut at 800 very, very easily out of vinyl, out of cardstock, with the Tyvek. But again, you get into a denser product where you're pushing the blade through, you're going to have, more difficulty, then you're going to want to turn it down. So let's go on to that, to show that close-up of that cougar, if we could, Michelle, please. And thank you for taking care of those. I was going to make an announcement that I sent the paper to Rob, 2-day priority, and it appears that between Minnesota and Tennessee, 2-day priority is not 2-day priority because he didn't get the paper. So that's why Michelle stepped in here and cut those things for us. So thank you. We really, really appreciate you
Oh, you're
stepping
welcome.
taking care of that for us. This is the penny that Rob was talking about, so he could show in conjunction to the whiskers on this cat. Pretty phenomenal cutting on there, and again, cut in one pass. You pull it off that mat, and that's exactly the way that it looked. And you'll get to see it cutting here in a little bit. And Rob, did you have anything you wanted to add to this about the cutting of it, or?
No, no. I mean, you guys will see. You'll see it cut, and then you'll see me just peel this thing off, and it's very quick cleanup with this Tyvek. You'll see the nice cuts with it.
So should we move on to that then? Rob, we'll set that
Yeah,
up and start
yeah.
cutting.
I got it. Let's see. Let me go ahead and pull it up here. Let me go
And
ahead.
then while this is cutting, if anybody, has any questions or anything, you guys can start asking. I believe that Michelle has the ability to read those questions and you can start answering questions from people. When
Hmm.
we're doing some of this cutting and we're showcasing some of this, the shows are probably going to be, a little bit shorter because it takes a lot of prep time for this. And I do believe at this time we should probably maybe announce, Rob, that we're thinking about going to every other week, where one week we're going to deal with the software and the next week we'll deal with machine cutting, engraving, embossing, just whatever it is, we're going to choose the machine in action. And so we'll do a week of software and then a week of something with the machine.
Oh yeah, yep. Yeah, that's a plan anyway. So if you guys want any, if you guys want to give us input on what you would like to see, feel free to let us know, either Michelle or Sherry.
Yeah,
No.
yeah, and I think the way we'd like to start is absolutely from the basics. I don't think anybody has ever gone back to the shortcuts a lot, just the basics. So some of our new users or some of our people who are just thinking about maybe buying a machine and watching the shows to see will feel a little bit more comfortable. And I know that for some people, going over some of these things may seem a little bit boring because you already know what you're doing, but there's always tips in this software that somebody else has come up with, and I think it's good to watch it and see if you can come up with some new ways of doing things or contribute if you know something.
Yeah. So I'm going to go ahead and hopefully you guys can see my screen. If you don't, go ahead and say you can't see my screen. But I'm sort of going to walk just to give you a little bit of the shortcuts a lot on how we set this up, and then we'll while this thing is cutting, there's some questions that came in that I'm going to cut my mic off. That way you guys don't have to hear the cutter cut,
Okay.
and Michelle and Sherry can answer some of these questions. Okay.
Okay.
So like I said, hopefully you guys can see the screen. This is the Puma that you see on the mat, and you know basically you can click the object over here and you can tell what size it is. That's what I always like to do first. So I make sure that I have enough material on my mat in order to complete the project. So this one right here has the width and height set. So I just want to make sure that my height is set to 11, and then whatever the width gave me, that's what it did. And you can enter the values in manually, or you can use these up and down arrows. What I always make sure to do is keep it proportional, and that way it will grow and shrink at the right size. So when you go and actually cut this, there's a couple things you have to think about. I'm just going to go over the origin point with this. And what I always like to do whenever I set my mat up is you'll notice they have a little feeder arrow right here, and that is how I have my silver bullet sitting to me. You know, so I feed it forward as well. And my reference point for my origin, and it's going to be this bottom right corner. So that's where it's going to start, and that's why you see my mat bottom right corner right here, and we're comparing that to right here. So hopefully that will make sense once we hit the cut button. So I'm going to hit the cut button up here, and here's this menu here. And just like Sherry said, this is the part that she was talking about, where this check mark, you always want to make sure that it is unchecked for now anyway, to allow you to actually use what we set up here in the silver bullet that you saw on the key control panel. You know, the force was set to 60, the velocity was set to 800, and that's what we're going to go with. Cut mode, I'm going to select origin, and you know, you'll sort of see a little preview right here. So that bottom right corner, that's where the origin is, bottom right corner of the Puma. And that's about it. I'm just going to hit cut here.
Okay.
Okay, our first question is by Barbara, and she wants to know if we could use transfer tape to move the design off the mat.
You can, and as a matter of fact, that was one of Dawn's suggestions this morning, is after she got it cut, and using transfer tape to transfer it, in particular with Tyvek, because it's very similar to doing the same thing with vinyl.
Yeah, it's a very thin and strong material. We have a question, or just a comment from Sherry. She said, awesome.
Oh. Hey, Sherry.
And also Jenna has a comment, full speed, that's good to know. And Barbara, she also states Tyvek is a great stuff and it colors well, and Joe uses it here.
Yeah, and we thank you, Barbara. To that point, when you go to Dawn's store, you can see she's actually got hers colored, and it does a beautiful job on coloring on the Tyvek. So yes, thank you for offering that, Barbara.
Also, we have a question from Kim. She asks, how do you use Tyvek? She assumes it's not as sticky on one side like vinyl.
Absolutely. It's the same on both sides. Depending on where you get the Tyvek, I happened to order it on Amazon to have shipped to Rob, and I thought that he needed a lot of it, I guess, because the roll I sent him was 165 feet long. He was rather surprised when I got a 4-foot-high box with a roll of Tyvek in it, but and it's actually marked on one side Tyvek because it is for housing projects and things like that. I told him to give it to his boys for slip and slides, the excess, because that's used for that as well. And commonly you can purchase it for underneath when you're going camping, to put underneath sleeping bags and things, because water cannot penetrate it. So, you know, it's just Tyvek on Amazon.com, and it's the same on both sides. There is a plastic, it is a plastic paper is actually what it is, and it's impossible to tear. You can't tear it. You can stretch it and stretch it, but it won't tear. You do have to cut it, but it cuts very easily.
Jenna also has a comment. She says, thank you, Sherry, Michelle, and Rob, for starting at the beginning. So helpful.
Welcome.
And we have a question by Bob. Why would someone choose Tyvek instead of paper or cardstock, and what is it good for?
Well, the Tyvek is relatively inexpensive, and the best part about the Tyvek is that it's an absolute beautiful medium to cut, and I think when you find something that's less expensive, it's easy to color. So if you wanted to, you know, like in particular this cheetah, when you go and look at Dawn's site and see how she's colored it and how nicely it works out, it's just a very easy medium to work with that's relatively inexpensive, and you can large sheets, and I guess that's probably why I think that we have many people looking for something different than the standard cardstock and vinyl and the average things that people cut. And I think that's where this came up. And once people started using it, it's kind of caught on now, and it does a beautiful job. You cannot color cardstock the same way you can this Tyvek, because the cardstock has a tendency to wick in all of the moisture from the paint or the stamping pad or whatever it is that you're using to color it. And with this, you're going to use less product as well, because it's of because of the plastic properties in it. It protects it from soaking through.
Yeah, you could do a lot of nice shading effects on it just from her project I seen. So yeah.
Yeah, she did a great job on shading on it. Yeah,
did.
Mm-hmm. And you could actually cut this and use this as a stencil as well. And I think for people that are using the plastic for stencils, I think this would be a good alternative, because it's lighter weight, it cuts very easy, and you can't tear it. And once you've put this in place, you can very easily spray this and have the reverse effect on it. And so that's, depending on how you do the design, I think that's another alternative way of using it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it could be used over and over, because it's not going to soak up the
absolutely
the sprays or whatever you're going to use, the inks or something.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and some of the spray mists and things like that, you could do some pretty great things doing butterflies and things, where you're going to get the different shadings on the butterflies by using it over and over again, but you won't have that hard plastic for some of the stencil material that you might be using. So. Mm-hmm. Good alternative for the business people who are making stencils. It's a really good, inexpensive alternative for them.
Also, Judy asks, where do you buy Tyvek?
I got this on Amazon.com, and there were several choices. I first of all got three sheets of it, and I'm sorry, I can't remember what the cost was. There was three 3-foot sheets, and then for whatever reason I thought that might not be enough for Rob, so I had that shipped to me, and then I went and went a little bit farther and saw the 165-foot roll of it, and I thought, well, that should be enough. He'll share it with Michelle, and so then I had that sent to him. You can buy it in any Menards, Home Depot, Lowe's. All of them have Tyvek. All of that would be by the roll. But again, it's a relatively inexpensive medium that would last a long time. So.
Gigi also asks about coloring the Tyvek. What is the best media to use for coloring it?
I haven't personally colored it. I believe that Dawn would have used either.
I'm thinking like daubers, little
yes.
Sponges, probably makeup, things like that.
Probably, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I know that you could also use, like I said, the stamp pads. So that would be something as well. I can't see any medium that you wouldn't be able to use on it. But again, maybe in another session when Dawn's on here, she can tell us what she used to paint that.
Mm-hmm.
But now that I have some of it and we'll be cutting some of it, I'll probably play with it a little bit as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Or if we have any of you out there that want to cut some of this and sample it and show us what you've done with it, we're happy to show that.
Oh yeah, we'd love to show your projects.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So while you guys are still answering questions, I'm going to, hopefully they can still see the webcam here. If not, we are recording the webcam. And go ahead and keep talking. I'm just going to stay muted and peel this off so they can actually see what it cut.
Okay. Thank you, Rob.
Also, Barbara says that there are two thicknesses. The thicker one would be good for stencil, she says.
Okay, good. And I actually didn't know that, so thank you, Barbara.
Yeah, I wasn't aware of that
either.
either.
Wealth of knowledge there from Australia.
Mm-hmm. And Judy Stark also has a comment, and she said thank you.
Aw. Thank you back. It's good to see you or hear of you. It'd be better to be seeing everybody, but I'll have to be in the same room for that. Someday.
Someday, yep. And
someday.
That's all the questions.
Okay. We'll keep
Does
them
anybody
coming.
else have any other questions?
They're all interested in watching Rob tear this off. It's kind of funny because we're just really getting Rob into doing some of this crafting, and it was quite comical yesterday when he was working with that zebra, and I personally didn't realize how difficult it was, but he just kept saying, "I'm not a crafter." And, yeah, well, you don't have to be a crafter, just pull that Tyvek off. And then when speaking to Dawn this morning, she had a good chuckle out of it. She said, "Oh, it is a real problem file if you don't know what you're doing." Too bad she didn't tell us that ahead of time. Uh, and I didn't call her to ask her yesterday because I thought she was getting ready for the retreat. She actually was ready, but Rob caught her this morning on Facebook. So you can see him pulling that off, and it just comes off so beautifully.
Yeah, comes off really good.
Yeah. And there we have it. Beautiful. There it is.
Yeah, so
That is
I
awesome.
always think that it always looks better on black paper,
Yeah,
Mhm.
it does. Yeah.
and and that zebra file. I'll get this in the shot here. So then we have the zebra one. Hopefully, oh, let me fix it before you guys actually see it. But hopefully,
Oh, there we
there
go.
we go. So that was my problem file yesterday. But I mean, it turns out great. I mean, hopefully you guys can tell it's a zebra, right?
You
Yeah,
get
it
you
looks really
can.
nice.
Looks really nice, Rob.
Yeah. So see,
How long did it take you to put that together then, Rob?
it took me about 10 good concentrating minutes.
Okay.
And
It
I was
is
sort of
all.
glad that this Tyvek had something on it to let me know that it was the back, because some of these tiny pieces, it was hard to know whether it was twisted or not.
Oh, okay. That's good to know too, because maybe we need to mark the back if you're going to do something like that. So it is all one piece. The only thing that's missing is she has a tiny dot or a
And for
tiny
this
white
eye.
dot in his eye, but otherwise that all is one piece. But the problem with it was that the nose and the face, once it's cut, were kind of flying around out there, and with plastic it was curling up a little bit, and of course that's what caused the uh, problem with putting it together and getting it exactly right. But great job, Rob.
All right, so let's see. We got a couple comments after I did my peeling here. So we got Heather. She said it's gorgeous.
Yep.
Uh, and then let's see. We have Gigi. Oh, not Gigi. Oh, we have Kim West here. She said, "Wow, that's awesome. That's gorgeous by Gigi." Sherry said,
Uh,
"Beautiful. Love it." She's like, "I may need one now. May need to do one now." So
and again, Dawn will have both of these at the store after the retreat, but she doesn't have the files for sale yet, but she will put them up so you guys can check out next week, and she'll have them up there. If not, just give her a boost and ask her where they are because beautiful files to cut.
yeah, and what's nice is they are one piece. You know.
Yeah, yeah. Just got to get them to lay down like that, right, Rob?
I know. Yeah, you just got to. Yeah, the zebra one. I mean, the cheetah, like you saw, peeled right off, right off. No,
Hmm.
no issue with it. So
Yeah. I don't want to scare people away from the zebra. I mean,
yeah,
it's just
yeah. I mean,
it peeled
you just
off
have, you
really
just have
easy.
to
It was
take your
just
time. See, like if you just move it just a little. I haven't glued these down or anything, but
oh, okay. And again, Dawn said she has a trick to getting the adhesive on there before it's cut so that when you're taking it off that it isn't such a problem with all of those little bits and pieces going in place like they should.
yeah,
So
maybe I can zoom in on these whiskers here. I don't know. I don't know if it will focus.
yeah,
Let's
it's
see.
pretty good.
I might,
Focus good. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, look at those thin slices. I don't know how far I can zoom. I think that's as far as I can zoom, but I mean, just take a look at that.
I feel like a real proud mama.
Mm-hmm.
Look what that silver bullet did.
Yeah.
It's exactly what we wanted it to do, and it's done it, and we're really, really pleased.